problem is the...
So I hope you're enjoying the Where's a Boston Tea Party, the coffee and cakes. I would now like to introduce your next speaker for the Internet of Good Things conference, who will address how to sell your Internet of Things idea. It's Intel's Director of EMEA Strategic Marketing for Internet of Things, Elaine Cook.
Hello, good afternoon. We look a little bit depleted post-coffee break, so hopefully I'll be able to keep you awake until the caffeine clicks in. So, we've talked quite a lot about the Internet of Things, about how it's a buzzword. This is the Gartner hype cycle, and this is where we are for the Internet of Things. We are right at the top of that hype cycle, and this bit down here is called the Trough of Disillusionment, which I think is a brilliant name. And it looks like we might be about to career into that trough of disillusionment before we get to the reality of implementation. Now, I have to say, I'm very sorry, Gartner, but the plateau of productivity, that's the other side, doesn't somehow inspire me to kind of plow on through that trough of disillusionment. I don't want a plateau of productivity. I want a great big ramp of productivity. And actually, that's what I think we're going to get, because if the internet were a movie, we'd still be in the opening credits. If you go back 60 odd years, you get to the first commercial computer. Fast forward a little bit, you get to the first microprocessor. Fast forward a little bit more to 1983, you get the first personal computer from IBM. 1991, the World Wide Web. Swiftly followed 1997 by Google, which is quite hard to imagine these days. 2003, the Intel Centrino. I promise I'm not going to fill this with Intel plugs, but the thing about Intel Centrino was that it started to make Wi-Fi real, because it had Wi-Fi built into every single Centrino platform. So that was the Wi-Fi revolution. And then the developments come thick and fast. You've got Facebook, you've got iPhones, you've got tablets, you've got smart cities starting to come along. And we're really just at that hockey stick point where developments are going to come thicker and faster and more. And that change is quite challenging. So 40% of the Fortune 500 companies in the US in the year 2000 were not there by the year 2010. Kodak was one of those, for example. So Kodak was valued at $26 billion in 1996. Had 140,000 employees worldwide. We all know what happened to Kodak. They kind of missed the whole digital photo revolution and went bankrupt. They went bankrupt in 2012. That same year, Instagram were valued at $1 billion and had just 13 employees. So everything about the way that we do business is fundamentally changing. Businesses that were around in the 20s and had made it to be one of the big companies in the world could expect to survive for about 67 years in that top 500 companies. That lifespan of a big company has come down dramatically. So there are a few things that we can learn from that. The first is, in the Kodak example, be paranoid, spot trends, spot what's happening, and respond to them. And the second thing is that if you want to survive, you can't ever just stand still. Your product is never, ever completely finished, because there's lots and lots of people out there looking at how to make money. So as you're developing your product and you're thinking about how you're going to sell them, you also need to be thinking about the next generation and how you improve it. And does that actually mean opening it up and looking for ideas from other people and crowdsourcing, in effect, to help speed up your platform development? So in the world of the Internet of Things, in some ways, the consumer IoT is leading the way, and you heard Ewan from Microsoft talk about this earlier. We've got smart wearable devices coming in. Obviously, smartphones have completely transformed the way that we do business and live our lives. Smart watches, smart everything, as well as devices like Nest and Hive in your home. But as Ewan said, B2B IoT is where the money is, and that's coming along really quickly. And deployments are happening now. So for all of the talk about it being hype, these are all deployments that are happening now, and I'll talk about a few of them, and then we'll look at some of the imperatives of how these ideas are being successful and what other people need to do to make their ideas successful. So the first is a smart wheelchair. And this is a really interesting example. This is actually not a commercialized product yet, but what it shows is what you can do very quickly and very cheaply if you have the right mentality. This was a group of Intel engineering interns who set about on a summer project and made a wheelchair for Professor Stephen Hawking. And they've put biometrics in it, and they've put predictive maintenance in it, and they've combined all of that to make a wheelchair that really makes a difference to the way that people live. And that will be commercialized, and that will go out there because the value proposition of that is very clear. The second example, this great big truck down in the other side of the screen, Sire. So Sire are one of the largest trucking companies in the US. And a company called Vnomics has developed a platform that tracks driver behavior and trains drivers to drive more efficiently. It also does all of their time logging for them. So one of the big things for drivers is obviously you're allowed to drive for a set period of time, and then you have to have a break, and then you can drive for a bit more. So this automates all of that, which means that when they get in the cab and turn on their engine, their time log starts automatically rather than them having to waste time doing that manually. It also then tracks how they're shifting gear and what gear they're in at what time and how effectively they're using their fuel efficiency. Now, you can imagine in the US, their fuel efficiency is not great anyway. And on a truck this size, it's really, really, really not great. They started from a point of 5.9 miles per gallon. They've improved that by 7%, which doesn't sound a lot, but you know, it's a start. The CO2 benefits from that are obviously immense, but the cost savings for that are already $15 million per year, and will just keep increasing as they look for more ways. So the business proposition in that and the way that they sold that is obviously data-based. You know, you have an environmental benefit, but you have a bottom line benefit. What is the return on investment? The third example, I quite like this one, and I quite like number 4, and I quite like number 7. Connected keg. This is a beer keg. A company in the US called SmartServe has developed an iKeg, which is basically a smart scale which you sit your beer keg on. And this is transforming a business that's basically been the same for about 7,000 years. In the old days, and I have to say that when I was at university, I worked as a barmaid, and you'd have to go down to the cellar, and basically the way you check whether a beer keg needed changing was to kind of pick it up and give it a shake and see how much noise it made and how heavy it was. And if it felt light, then you change it because you didn't want to be wasting beer and wasting customers' beer when you served. So the scales mean that you can very accurately tell how much beer is in there. And it's smart because it's connected to the cloud, and it sends all of that signaling down to your iPhone or your Android phone so that you can be monitoring the exact amount of beer in that keg at any point of time. Now, they reckon that between 5 and 10% of beer in any single keg gets wasted because it's just oh yeah, that kind of feels a bit light. If they're able to reduce that, they're obviously able to make incremental profits. So again, you're looking at the business case. What is the value proposition of my IoT device? Cupcake dispenser. Now, the business proposition on this one is, this is when you feel like you need a cupcake at 11 o'clock at night and all the cupcake shops are shut. Now, I have to say that, you know, generally, probably, I mean, these are deployed across the US. It's quite a famous cupcake company over there. But I have to say, if you're feeling the need for a cupcake at 11 o'clock, probably just live with it and go to bed, and you'll be lighter in the morning. It's fine. But in the wonderful world that is America, they have cupcake ATMs where you can go up, seriously, and you can go up at 11 o'clock at night or 2 a.m. in the morning, and you can buy whatever flavor cupcake you like. And it's stocked last thing at night before the folks go home. It's restocked through the day. And they're actually finding that it's a very popular business model and that people are buying cupcakes out of hours. So the business proposition there is obviously that you don't need your shop open for as many hours to get more business. You don't have to be staffing it until 11 o'clock at night. You can put this ATM in at a relatively low installation cost. You can be stocking it with stock throughout the day and at the end of the day, and you can be making incremental revenue at a point where you wouldn't otherwise have been making it, it would have been a lost sale. So number 7, the smart vending, kind of goes with that. In the UK, the biggest vendor of coffee in our high streets now is Costa Coffee. And their goal is to save the world from mediocre coffee. And of course, one of the big places that you get mediocre coffee is from a vending machine. So Costa Coffee have a smart vending machine, which has a beautiful touch screen, large touch screen. It has audience analytics, so it can anonymously say that I have a nice gentleman stood in front of me and he's an adult. And it can then see that this particular gentleman would like, what's your favourite coffee? A latte, right. So he drinks a latte. Do you take that with syrup? No, no syrup. Do you take sugar with that? No. Okay. The vending machine basically goes through that process with everybody. It has 275 different drink combinations. It has freshly ground coffee. It has fresh semi-skimmed milk. It has tea and it has milk drinks as well. And it can tie back that the majority of adult males like lattes at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So you're not only getting the fact that you can get coffee in a space that you wouldn't otherwise have been able to get decent coffee. It's much cheaper to install a vending machine than it is to open a franchise or a high street coffee shop. But you're also getting a level of analytics that you didn't previously know about your customer base. You can be seeing who's buying what at what time of the day, and you can be assessing the profitability of particular sites. And these are being deployed across the UK. They have them in Heathrow Terminal 5 and Heathrow Terminal 2. And the ubiquitous machines that you see in the gas stations from Costa Express are slowly being upgraded to these smart ones, which also have predictive maintenance and stock levels. So it's flagging to Costa and to the owner when it needs to be restocked with milk or with syrup or with coffee. So I won't go through all 10 because otherwise we'll be here all day. But there's, whilst some of them seem gimmicky, all of them have in common that they are an end-to-end solution and that they have a real business value to the people involved. So let's look at some things that we need to collectively do if we're going to be successful in IoT and make some money from it, because let's face it, that's what we're all here for. So the first is to innovate in verticals. Now verticals, I looked at this one and I thought, crikey, that's quite an Intel word. What we mean by verticals is specific industries. So what the Internet of Things is really good at doing is providing very niche solutions that solve a business need in a particular industry, whether that is industrial manufacturing, whether that's the fleet management example that we just looked at, whether that's a vertical of cupcake shops. You find a vertical market and you identify a need that that market has. So you have to understand your market that you're going after. And then you have to add intelligence and analytics. So again, reiterating what has already been said today, everything we do in the Internet of Things is about extracting data that enables us to make better business decisions. And then you have to make it cost effective, and you have to keep making it cost effective until it gets really affordable to take to market. And then you have the opportunity to transform the business and reinvent the business model. And I think this is the other really good thing that the Internet of Things is doing. In the same way as mobility has completely transformed business models, you can look at companies like Uber as an IoT company. The way that they're doing business is very similar. They are taking data from certain points, matching it and extracting business value and completely transforming business models on the back of it. So another example might be in medical. So this is a scanner. It's Intel plug. It's based on an Intel Xeon processor. It's a single point in a hospital. And obviously, getting the data, processing it quickly, getting your diagnostics back is really important. But there are lots and lots of ways that you can delve deeply into the vertical that is the medical world and look for value. For example, there is a lot of issues with notes not being updated. You know, doctors are very overworked. And so getting notes correctly updated so that appointments are made for follow-ups, and this is a big problem in the NHS. So if you can introduce voice recognition so that the doctors can be updating their notes as they go along, fantastic. Now that's starting to happen. It's not happening completely effectively because most voice recognition technologies are based on male voices. If you look around the room, you might get an inkling as to why that is. I have a female friend who is an orthodontist. Her voice recognition note taker doesn't recognize it when she says tooth. It's quite a problem for an orthodontist. So we're working on all of those things, and you'll see that technology evolve. Another problem is equipment management. So most hospital equipment is only used 30 to 40% of the time. But when you need it in a hurry. And so nurses have a tendency to hoard some of that equipment so that they know where it is when they need it. And that is kind of counterproductive because that one nurse knows where she's put it or he's put it, but the rest of the world doesn't. So you end up in a cycle of delays for the patient because you're trying to identify where equipment is. It also means that that equipment potentially misses out on its routine cleans. So GE in the US implemented a system, a location tracking system on all of this equipment. And it meant that the nurses had confidence that they were going to be able to find the equipment, so they stopped hoarding it. It also meant that they were able to find the equipment more effectively and quickly, and it meant that the equipment was used more of the time. So effectively, the hospital didn't need to invest in buying new equipment because they always knew where equipment was. They were able to discharge patients more effectively and quickly. Basically, everyone was happier. And the business model for that is that they've changed it from being a one-time sell of a piece of equipment into a service. And a lot of what I'm talking about is recurring themes, and you will hear, services and software as a service. It's really how we transform the business models and start making money from this, because it's much, much better to sell something once and then make a little bit of money every month thereafter from it than to just sell something once. So then we need to think, for our second thing that we have to do is to think end-to-end solution. We have to paint the whole picture. So we need to think about open architecture so that it's easy for other people to contribute to our idea and add value to our idea, which then enhances the value of what we're doing as well as what they're doing. Obviously, it needs to be connected. That's kind of a given. The other given that we've not talked very much about today is security, and that's not so much from a privacy perspective, but from the technology perspective. What are you doing to keep that data safe and secure and away from malwares and attacks? But again, that's a given. It has to be fundamental. If you don't have that, then you're going to fall at the first hurdle. It's pretty much the first question that customers ask as they implement B2B IoT solutions. You need to be able to manage it remotely. So the predictive maintenance things that we've talked about are critical here. And then the analytics. This is really the true value to the business. The way that you extract that data and then what you do with that data is what sets you apart from the competition. So the example for this one is a company called Whoosh. Whoosh are Israeli, and they have a smart water dispenser that they are deploying in cities. So this offers purified drinking water in public places. And obviously this is a good and noble goal. You're walking around a big city and you get thirsty, and so at the moment what you typically do is pop into a shop and buy a bottle of water, and then you have a plastic bottle to get rid of. And not all cities have recycling in their streets yet, so it's contributing to a landfill problem. Whoosh kind of solves that problem because it's a refillable, you take your refillable water bottle along, and Whoosh helps you out. They are looking for many different ways in which they extract revenue from that, because essentially water's water. There's a limit as to how much people are going to pay for that service. So they're working with city councils to explore every avenue of how they could extract value from this. So there's a kind of little screen up here on the top. They're looking at advertising revenues off that. They're looking at, can they provide Wi-Fi hotspots through this, and obviously charge for that Wi-Fi access. They're looking at they're looking at charging stations. Can they turn it into a charging station and offer services that way? And basically just exploring every single avenue for extracting value from their design, and how they work with cities and multiple other players within the value chain to get value and get paid for what they're doing. Okay, and then imperative number 3, partner for success. No one can do this by themselves. It's a massive, massive chain, and Ewan said this again this morning. To go from the device to the gateway to the cloud to the data extraction, and all of the bits in between, it is a massive job that no single one company is really able to achieve. And if you're looking at how you're going to make money, it's really in your area of differentiation. So trying to do something that you're not good at isn't going to help you to succeed when there are lots and lots of other people who are good at that stuff. So working out who to partner with and how you make value for each and every person in that value chain is critical. So one part of that is having standards so that everybody can work together and speed things along. So there are standards like the Open Interconnect Consortium, there's the Industrial Internet Consortium, there's Hypercat in the UK, which has got things off to a flying start, and that we're proud to support. There are people who offer building block solutions to help develop solutions to market faster. On the panel earlier was mentioned Intel products like Galileo and Edison that can help speed things to market. There are players like Mashery whose API management systems mean that you can start interfacing with other applications and gaining more value and adding more services without needing that expertise in-house. So it's really about how you make that happen and how you find the partners that work for you. And again, as the panel said earlier, that's going to be different for every individual company. So in conclusion, I think that the IoT is really burgeoning, and we're on the brink of a massive opportunity. And it's a really interesting opportunity because it's not just open to the big players in the market. You've seen companies like Nest, or the example of Instagram earlier, grow from very, very small companies to very, very big companies very quickly. So if you grasp on the right idea, then the world is your oyster, to use an old phrase. So it's really about grasping those opportunities and finding the right partners and making sure that you have the right business proposal for your market to be able to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elaine. I think you tackled the post-cake shift very well there. I'm just going to hand straight over to Henry, who's going to offer you a chance to ask your questions of Elaine, as well as some pre-prepared questions.
Right, thank you, Elaine. So, do we have any initially from the floor? Anyone? No one? No takers? I feel like an auctioneer all of a sudden. Okay, so, Elaine, here's one we prepared earlier. What is the most important thing to consider during each of the channel phases that customers go through in their interactions with the business? Awareness, evaluation, purchase, delivery, use, and after-sales support.
So When you look at the whole purchase cycle, it's radically changed over the last few years, essentially because of the internet. And the way people buy has changed. So 53% of shoppers have abandoned a purchase in store because of all the information on their smartphone, for example. So the classic funnel of awareness, evaluation, purchase doesn't apply because people are zipping backwards and forwards through the kind of evaluation phase for much longer. And although people are worried, a lot of retailers are worried that footfall is falling into stores or that online is stealing business, actually people are doing all of their evaluation and then making a decision and then carrying it out very swiftly. But it means that instead of a linear process, you have a dot-to-dot process, or somebody, Kantar Retail described it as a fish-shaped process. So all of those processes are important because if you get to post-sale support and you do a bad job, that will appear on the internet and that will appear in your reviews and people won't then buy your product.
So do we have any takers, any questions? No, okay. So how would you say, how can you compete against free competitors online who use advertising freemium bait and hook revenue generation models? How would you say?
I think it comes down to differentiation. Really, if you're offering exactly the same product and you're charging and they're not, then any savvy consumer is going to pick the free one. So there has to be some level of differentiation, whether that's in the service levels or in the product offering and the features and benefits. But you really need that level of differentiation. And if you have that, then you will find a market.
We have a question.
Hi there, Adam Reynolds, SureSense. You mentioned that there were a number of open standards. Is Intel betting on one or just supporting all of them?
We're not supporting all of them because there's an awful lot. It feels like there's one a day at the moment.
Which one's your favourite?
So at the moment, and we're part of the ones up here, the Open Internet Consortium. We're in the Industrial Internet Consortium. We're in HyperCat. And there are a couple of others as well, whose names escape me, to be completely honest.
So which one would you bet on? Go on, give us an answer.
I'm not going to bet. I think it's too early to say. And I'd also say that you don't want to take my opinion on these things like these either. It's a very nascent business, and there are lots of standards cropping up. And obviously you have competitive ones like AllJoin as well. That have different levels of IP control around them. So there's a lot of things to look into if you're looking at which standards you want to belong to. But standards overall are a good thing, and we will see them consolidate and come down to just a handful, probably to one per vertical ultimately, and maybe even pan-vertical eventually. It enables your customers to implement things in a joined-up fashion very quickly, and that's why it's a good thing, because it enables that scale and enables you to go in and say, yes, it'll work with the other things you've already got in place. But yeah, it will be a little while before we see who are the winners and losers in those standards games.
I was going to say, it surely can never be possible to have one standard to rule them all. Okay, maybe not.
Yeah, I'd actually argue that there are kind of a few out there, especially in the technology kind of game. USB is pretty ubiquitous. Wi-Fi, 3G, those are all standards that apply fairly universally.
But that's for things pretty much doing all the same sort of things. When you're talking about IoT, you're going to have devices doing so many different things, surely. So would it be possible
absolutely,
to...
Which is why you're going to see maybe one for industrial manufacturing, because you need everything in that supply chain to be talking the same language. Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, Peter.
Thanks very much. Hi Elaine. Thanks for your presentation. I think it'd be really useful for the room and certainly for me to hear a little more about Intel's strategy around the whole Galileo and Edison, Moon Island, and certainly where there's because clearly that's something one of the firms I'm involved with is beginning to do work with, and I'm sure a lot of the other firms here would love to hear about SDKs and and how they can pick up some baseline involvement with that tech.
Okay, yep, I had deliberately not done a sales pitch, but if you would like a sales pitch. Galileo and Edison are really exciting. They're based on a new processor family called the Intel Quark processor, which is a Pentium class processor, completely redesigned from scratch, very, very small, very, very low power. The Galileo board is a fully equipped board. It's Arduino compatible. It means that you can take a computer almost out of the box and start playing with it and developing things very quickly. And you know that you can bring things to life very, very quickly on this. We've seen things come to life in less than a day. So it's an amazing development platform. It's not designed to be Raspberry Pi. It's a level of complexity above Raspberry Pi, which means that you can do a lot more with it. But it's not as straightforward, to be completely honest. Edison is the size slightly smaller than an SD card, so it's a very, very small form factor. Again, it has all of that processing power, that full compute. We think it's going to be very exciting in the world of the Internet of Things and to a lesser extent wearables. Again, because it enables that swift development and it enables devices that previously couldn't have considered Intel architecture to be on Intel architecture, get the benefits of that scalability, manageability, and your software compatibility as well. So that's really exciting. The Intel Quark processor is also a key component in the gateways. Ewan showed a picture earlier of the devices and then a hub and then the cloud. So that hub is essentially an intelligent gateway which gathers information from sensors, can do the first level of analysis, and then push the data that needs to be pushed up to the cloud for the big data analytics. And the reason that we believe that you need an intelligent device down there is that, in a very simplistic example, if you have a smart fridge and you're checking that fridge is 5 degrees, you don't really want the cloud filled up with a 5 degrees, 5 degrees, 5 degrees, 5 degrees. What you kind of need is to know that it's 5 degrees and to have it flagged if it goes outside your parameters, and to probably have it flagged up to the cloud every 2 hours. It's still there. It's still 5 degrees, but you certainly don't need that 5 degrees, 5 degrees, 5 degrees, because otherwise we're going to fill the cloud very quickly, which is obviously a good thing if you're a cloud service provider. But you're all paying for that data storage, so you want to think about what data you want to store and make sure that it's valuable. Ewan used an example of data just spewing out, and that's a good example. There needs to be some rationalization of that data and some intelligence added before you pump it up to the cloud.
Okay, anybody else? Any more questions? We've got time for maybe one more on here. One of the pre-supplied ones. What are the sources of e-value, things that customers find valuable online?
So I think that certain business fundamentals have changed profoundly with the advent of mobility and the advent of the Internet of Things. Certain business fundamentals have not changed. And so value is what you deliver to the customer, what your point of differentiation is, what your solution offers to them that no other solution does, what problem does it fundamentally solve for them. And I think that's true whether it's e-value or just plain old value.
Okay, we've got time for one more. Surely somebody's got a question out there that they're dying to ask Elaine. Go on, you know you want to. Oh, here we go. Lovely. Thank you.
So
So obviously we're not going to comment on what Broadcom do. They can choose to do what they like. We are trying to support a range of standards bodies, as we've already discussed. And one of the things that we look at when we look at that is things like what control the standards body will have over IP that's submitted into it, and how everybody will contribute ideas to that standard, and how that process will work. Yeah, that's the very politically correct answer, but I don't know what Broadcom's reasons are.
Thank you, Elaine.
Thank
Very
you.
well dodged.